You open the fridge door at midnight because you're hungry and you don't even think twice about it. Cold air on your face, a dozen easy choices staring back, and you're mildly annoyed there's nothing to eat, even though there are 5 things you could microwave in 90 seconds. For you, food is a decision. For almost your entire species' history, it was a gamble that could kill you. For roughly 300,000 years, with no supermarkets, no refrigeration, no written record of which berries would stop your heart, how did human beings figure out what to eat at all? That's the question. One species, spread across nearly every environment on Earth, somehow cracked a puzzle that should have wiped out most of us before we solved it. So let's actually walk through how they did it, because the real story is stranger than they just ate whatever they found. Start with meat because that's where most people assume this begins. You picture a caveman with a spear bringing down a mammoth feeding the tribe. Cinematic, mostly wrong. Here's what nobody tells you. For a huge stretch of early human history, we weren't the hunters, we were the cleanup crew. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, archaeologist Mary Leakey and later researchers found animal bones dated to around 2 million years ago covered in 2 overlapping sets of marks, teeth marks from big cats and hyenas, and stone tool cut marks layered right on top. That order matters. The predators ate first. Early humans came second, cracking bones open with rocks to reach the marrow and brain tissue inside, the fatty, calorie-dense stuff the big carnivores couldn't get to. Think about that for a second. Your ancestors' first real advantage wasn't strength or speed. It was patience and a rock and the willingness to wait for a lion to finish eating. That single habit, scavenging marrow, may have supplied the fat that let brain size start climbing at all. Not conquest, just showing up after the danger passed, smart enough to use a tool the lions didn't have. Now here's where it gets harder because meat was never guaranteed, and most calories, most days, came from plants instead. And plants lie to you. A huge number of wild plants are toxic, bitter, or outright lethal, and they don't announce it. Cassava root, still eaten across parts of Africa and South America today, contains compounds that release cyanide if it isn't processed correctly, soaked, fermented, and dried, sometimes for days. Someone somewhere figured that out through trial and error, and the error side of that equation meant somebody got sick, or worse. This is the part that should stop you cold. Every plant your ancestors learned was safe represents an archive of pain, passed down not in books but in memory and taste. Anthropologists studying the Hadza people of Tanzania and the San people of the Kalahari have documented forager communities that can identify and safely use hundreds of plant species, which root to dig in the dry season, which berry needs cooking twice, which leaf is medicine in small doses and poison in large ones. That knowledge isn't instinct, it's culture. It's the oldest library humans ever built, and it had no pages, only grandmothers. And once you understand that, something else falls into place. Fire didn't just keep your ancestors warm, it rewrote human biology. At Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, archaeologist Michael Chazen and his team found burned bone fragments and ash dated to roughly 1 million years ago, some of the earliest solid evidence of controlled fire use anywhere on Earth. Here's the insight that doesn't hit you until you sit with it. Cooking is predigestion. Eating meat or a starchy root breaks down tough proteins and fiber before food ever reaches your stomach, so your body spends far less energy extracting the calories inside. Harvard biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that cooked food may have been the single biggest driver of brain growth in human evolution, because a smaller gut and a bigger brain both need surplus energy, and cooking freed up exactly that. Fire wasn't comfort. Fire was calories. And calories were survival. But here's the problem none of that solves. What happens when there's simply nothing to hunt, gather, or cook, because winter has arrived and the whole landscape has gone quiet? Most people's imagination of ancient life just stops here, like the story pauses for 3 months. It didn't pause. Winter meant months where calories dropped and the margin for error disappeared. So people got creative in ways that still show up in your kitchen today. The frozen body of Ötzi, a man who died around 5,300 years ago in the Alps and was found by hikers in 1991, had dried meat and grains in his gut when scientists examined him. Proof that drying food to survive winter was already a mastered skill 5 millennia ago. Fermentation did even more work. Turning cabbage into something like sauerkraut or milk into cheese and yogurt wasn't about flavor first. It was about time travel. Fermentation lets a food that would rot in days last for months instead, sometimes making its nutrients even easier to absorb. Indigenous groups across the Arctic developed pemmican, a dense mix of dried meat, fat, and berries that could last for years and pack enormous calories into very little weight. None of this was luck. It was engineering, done with no chemistry degree, nothing but generations of watching what worked and what killed you. Which brings you to the hunt itself, because eventually humans stopped scavenging leftovers and started going after the animal directly. That decision was terrifying. Picture it honestly. No rifles, no fences, just a group of people and a sharpened stick, walking towards something that outweighs them by 1,000 pounds and knows exactly how to use its horns. In 1994, archaeologists working at Schöningen in Germany uncovered wooden spears dated to around 300,000 years old, balanced and shaped like modern javelins, found beside the butchered remains of horses. That detail matters more than it seems. These weren't crude sharpened sticks. They were precision-engineered weapons, built by people who understood physics they had no words for. Here's the part nobody talks about. Hunting an animal that size was never a one-person job. It required timing, trust, and total cooperation, because one mistake could mean a broken leg or a wasted week of tracking. That's not just a hunting strategy. That's the literal birth of teamwork as a survival tool, because the people who cooperated well ate, and the people who didn't make it to the next season. So zoom out for a second, because all of this, the scavenging, the plant knowledge, the fire, the preservation, the hunting, was never really about food. It was about risk, managed across an entire community, refined generation after generation, with death as the only teacher that mattered. Here's what should genuinely humble you. Your ancestors didn't have a search engine to check if a mushroom was safe. They had each other, and memory, and the willingness to test the world carefully enough to survive it, but boldly enough to actually learn something. Every food tradition still alive today. Fermenting, drying, smoking, spicing, the specific combination of foods on your plate right now is a direct descendant of thousands of small experiments, most of which cost someone something. Research into the human gut microbiome has even started confirming what forager cultures seem to know instinctively. The sheer diversity of what early humans ate, hundreds of different plant and animal species across a lifetime, likely built a richer and more resilient population of gut bacteria than most people carry today, living on a narrow rotation of a few dozen processed foods. So winter came at your ancestors with 4 weapons: starvation, poison, predators, and time itself, and they answered every single one. They answered starvation with drying and fermentation. They answered poison with generational plant knowledge passed down like sacred text. They answered predators by scavenging leftovers with nothing but a rock and patience. They answered time by inventing cooking, which rewired the human brain itself. None of it was guaranteed. None of it was easy. And every one of those answers had to work almost perfectly, over and over, for thousands of generations in a row. Or you simply would not exist to read this sentence right now. That's the part that should actually stop you, not as trivia, but as a fact about you specifically. You are descended from an unbroken chain of people who guessed correctly about food every single time for 300,000 years straight, because one wrong guess anywhere along that chain ends the whole story. So go back to that fridge. Cold light on your face, easy choices, nothing that can kill you if you pick wrong. That convenience isn't nothing. It's the end result of an unimaginably long chain of people who tested the world with their own bodies so that you wouldn't have to. You're not just hungry tonight. You're the ending of a very long, very lucky story.